read that. I'm extremely grateful to the Lord Provost for making time in his very busy schedule to accommodate this event. There are, in fact, I think 3 other things he could be equally well opening this morning in Edinburgh on a streak day, and he chose this because of the importance that he and the City Council attributes to the initiative. So thank you again, Lord Provost. What are stock exchanges' role in not just capital markets but in society? I think if you think about the role of a stock exchange, you probably think of it as simply a place where trades get executed, cleared and settled. But the role of a stock exchange in a society is much, much larger than that. And of course the absence of a stock exchange is equally deeply felt. These 2 economists, Klaus Weber and Gerald Davis, published a big report a year ago on the role of global stock exchanges, especially in the countries where they've been more recently established, since 1945 and since 1967. I'm not going to read out the quote, but you can see that their view of the role of a stock exchange in an economy is far greater than simply providing a trading venue. A probe for taking the pulse of an economy and assessing its future prospects, a mechanism for effective governance, and a fulcrum for producing institutional and social change. You might not think the stock exchange can do all of those things, but I think a 21st century stock exchange can. And in my remarks now, I'm going to hopefully share part of that vision with you and give you some sense that this can be executed successfully. Of course, there was a Scottish Stock Exchange. In fact, there were 5. There was a stock exchange established in Glasgow in 1844, in Edinburgh the same year, in Aberdeen in 1845, and Dundee later in, I think, 1879. There was even a stock exchange in Greenock. Nothing ever listed in Greenock, but there was quite a lot of active trading in Greenock. So 5 stock exchanges, and they were consolidated after the President of the Board of Trade commissioned and received something called the Jenkins Report, which said that the regional stock exchanges, I'm not sure Scotland's a region, but anyway, the regional stock exchanges should be closed and consolidated and their securities lists transferred to from the smaller ones to the larger, more economically viable entities. Ultimately, that meant that the Edinburgh and the Aberdeen stock exchanges consolidated and transferred their securities list to Glasgow, and it became the Scottish Stock Exchange in 1964, and traded as that until 1971, when an Act of Parliament was passed to create what was called the International Stock Exchange for Great Britain and Northern Ireland, the institution that we now know better as the London Stock Exchange. So there have been stock exchanges in Scotland before, even in living memory. And just to show that, and fans of David Attenborough and Blue Planet, here is the Edinburgh stockbroker in his natural habitat. 2 North St David Street, on the last day of trading on the Edinburgh Stock Exchange before consolidation. As you can see, for fans of Blue Planet, apparently there is only one sex of Edinburgh stockbroker. Something that hopefully a new stock exchange can address. And you'll see also that, for the most part, what they're doing is not ringing bells or writing prices on blackboards. What they're doing is telephoning orders to the member firm's representative on the floor of the London Stock Exchange. So that was the most modern technology then. Clearly, we've moved on a great deal since then, but in particular, I think we've moved on the idea that you have to be a man to be a stockbroker. Edinburgh, of course, has remained a financial centre despite not having a stock exchange since then. I think that the recent calculation is something more than £200 billion of money is run here. Delighted that we have a representative of Baillie Gifford to join the panel later, talking about their investment strategy. As the Lord Provost said, Edinburgh is the 2nd largest financial centre in the United Kingdom and the 4th largest in Europe. So there's no sense in which it would appear that the absence of a stock exchange has had any effect on the asset management industry or the life industry. And yet the role of a stock exchange is also to have an impact on industry, to provide a platform where entrepreneurs can raise capital and where those who back them can achieve liquidity for their investments. And in that sense, the absence of a stock exchange has clearly been very significant, because if you do the research, you can see that the absence of a market means that when Scottish entrepreneurs come to realise the value that they've created, they tend to sell. The vast majority of them sell. There are very few IPOs, most of them sell, and if you speak to advisors in the Edinburgh and Glasgow markets, the implication is that by using a trade sale to provide liquidity rather than floating their business, of course the intellectual property leaves Scotland, in many cases the jobs leave Scotland, and clearly the value of the equity is depressed versus what value it might have achieved on a public market. So yes, a very strong asset management industry, a very strong life industry, but clearly the absence of a stock exchange has affected industry. It also affects the local community. I know, in my career, a ton of Scottish lawyers and CAs who make their career in the city and then hope to retire back to Edinburgh or Glasgow. That's economic value added, which has left the Edinburgh economy and the Scottish economy. It's economic value added, which could be generated here. Because the exchange, the London Stock Exchange as it now is, would say that a small cap business is anything less than £1 billion, you can see that it's not serving the local economy. What we need is an exchange that can serve new businesses that are growing up, rather than competing for existing businesses that are already grown up. Scotland has a sustainable framework, and we look to key into that in our impact reporting process. In fact, Scotland has been a leader in that, along with the Netherlands, which has its own national framework for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Scotland hasn't quite got that yet, but it's going in the right direction. And later on, I'm going to be delighted to introduce Jan Truren, who's come from Amsterdam today to speak about the role that EuroCCP will play in this project. And of course, you don't need me to tell you that Scotland has already achieved global leadership in at least 3 of these sectors, in its creativity, in life sciences and in renewables. And these are all businesses which, in other national economies, use public markets, are capital intensive, and develop successfully in a stock exchange environment. I don't think I can really build on a better foundation than the remarks of the Lord Provost. Why impact? I was struck. My middle daughter, joined the climate strike last Friday, and she's 14, and she thinks Greta Thunberg is amazing, and somehow that message that Greta Thunberg's communicated, that this is a crisis and why are all you men in suits not doing anything about it, has resonated with children and with students. We have 11 years until the Sustainable Development Goals are supposed to be achieved in 2030. We're clearly not at the moment taking initiatives that will generate a 1.5 degree centigrade world, and that's catastrophic. I met the Secretary General of the Commonwealth last year. She pointed out that there are 3 Commonwealth member states that will simply cease to exist unless climate change can be halted and then reversed. So why impact? I don't think that requiring companies to report on their social and environmental impact is going to make it harder to create a Scottish Stock Exchange. I think it's going to make it easier, because it's the 21st century. We should be measuring all of the values and all of the capitals which are used by a business as it grows, and not just financial capital. Impact is already mainstream in the private sector. In fact, in America, if I was doing this speech, people would say that you can't possibly have a stock exchange that cares about impact investing, because there's a disconnect of purpose between the investor and the company. I believe creating a new stock exchange addresses that, and the new stock exchange can be the armature which connects the purpose of the investor, Baillie Gifford for example, with the purpose of the board and the chairman and the chief executive in running their company to achieve a positive social and environmental impact. But in the United States, it's common knowledge that you can achieve impact in private equity and in private credit and in angel investing. We seek to change that, and hopefully the panel discussion later will give you confidence that we can. Impact investing also is a strategy which attracts very high quality institutions and participants. It's a strategy which encourages both the investor and the board to be fully conscious of the role that they play in the economy and in society. When you think about Sustainable Development Goals addressing the need to end poverty and improve access to food, make women equal to men, and so on, sometimes they sound as if they're things that which a business can't do anything about. But we know that's not the case. What we do need is businesses that think they can do something about it, businesses that are fully conscious at board level of the positive social and environmental impact that they can make in the course of their business operations, not as CSR, not by behaving badly 364 days of the year and then having a charity event. 3 years ago, when I was working for the Cabinet Office, I had one chap come up to me and say, of course they would meet an impact reporting test because they employed women. I had to tell him that was the law. So positive impact achieved purposefully in the course of the day-to-day business operations of the company is core to the business, not ancillary, not contingent, purposefully done, reported on the Scottish Stock Exchange, and that means that the board and the company is moving towards the priorities of some of the investors that you'll hear on the panel who want to achieve impact in a public-private investment. You're about to hear from Jan Truren at EuroCCP. We haven't quite signed the contract yet, but he promised me he's not going to leave until we do. We've agreed commercial terms with Euroclear, which is the operator of what's called CREST. For those of you that aren't stockbrokers, CREST replaced the London Stock Exchange's talisman settlement system in 1995. So this means that we'll be settling trades on the Scottish Stock Exchange using exactly the same architecture that is used by participants on London. It's very familiar. All retail stockbrokers, all corporate brokers use it. So we're not reinventing the wheels here, we're making it very easy for existing market participants to use the new market. Recruitment. Roger kindly invited you to look for people wearing sprigs of heather in the audience as your prospective carers. Delighted to say that we've made some very high-level appointments to our executive committee already. I can't see in the audience, but we have a new Director of Communications, Martha, who's just joined us from Charlotte Street Partners. We have our new Human Resources Director, Director of People, Alexa. We have our Marketing Director, Melissa Gilmore, who is there. We have Anna, who's Head of Community. I don't think Mike can be with us today. We have Richard in IT. We have Simon in Member Services. And I think that's... No, Finance Director, Mr. Hamilton. Sorry, Edwin. I can't see you in the light. So we've made a number of high-level appointments already. We've also appointed a Chief Operating Officer and a Compliance Officer, although they haven't joined us yet. I've met Maggie Craig. I've met Andrew Bailey. So we're in dialogue now with the FCA regarding the application for recognition. I think that the FCA takes comfort from the fact that we're contracting with Euronext, which is already recognised as an investment exchange in the United Kingdom, and contracting also with EuroCCP for clearing and Euroclear for settlement. We'll sign the contract with Euronext this month. It's obviously taken quite a lot of time to negotiate it, but it's been negotiated in a good spirit, and I'm pleased to say that Euronext now regard the initiative of creating a Scottish Stock Exchange as strategic for them. I think the lawyer handling the least emissive for this is in the audience, but we are looking at 28 St Andrews Square as an office for the stock exchange, and that will make us neighbours with Virgin Money and Rathbones, and obviously put us right in the centre of the new town. We're in the process of appointing the admissions panel. So the admissions panel is the panel that will focus on the impact requirements of the new exchange. Obviously, as a new exchange, we will be working with the United Kingdom Listing Authority for Primary Capital Markets. So if you think about the process as a broker or as a lawyer or as a CA, this would be equivalent to a standard listing on the official list. So you'd be dealing with the United Kingdom Listing Authority. We have our admissions panel that will run that process, but the admissions panel will be looking over and above their compliance with the Act for companies which can evidence a positive social and environmental impact and report against that and of course their business operations. The rule book is now complete and will be going out to consultation to relevant brokers and lawyers and accountants this month as well. We are trying to take an open and constructive approach to this, unlike perhaps some other exchanges, and that means that we want potential founding market participants, the brokers, the market makers, the lawyers and CAs, to think about our rules and to think about how they can be made better, more serviceable, so that they can be put into use. So it's a consultative exercise. I'm not just going to promulgate a rule book and demand that everyone complies with it. We want to take advantage of the extreme depth of knowledge in the Scottish financial services community to design a rule book that will work for everyone. We are in the process of recruiting brokers and accountants. I'm pleased to see some of them in the audience today. The Edinburgh Stock Exchange did close in 1964 and the Scottish Stock Exchange in 1971, but there are still some stockbrokers in Edinburgh, predominantly focused on wealth management, but still some corporate broking and market making and research. I'm delighted about that, and obviously they're the logical founding market participants for this new exchange. We're in the process of approving a board now that we've built the executive committee. Unlike that picture that you saw, my executive committee is more than 50% female, and we intend that the board is going to be more than 50% female as well. We want to represent gender diversity in a way that certainly wasn't done in 1971 or 1964. More than that, I think we all are familiar with cognitive diversity. The board of this exchange should not be just men in suits. It should be an exchange board that reflects the wider Scottish society, and just as the Lord Provost says, connects into the priorities of Scottish society, including the social impact priorities and the environmental impact priorities. FCA approval is now the critical factor. So if we sign with Euronext and EuroCCP and Euroclear, then the build is almost complete because we've invested in that last year. So we will have a technical platform to operate an exchange in Q2. It's then up to the FCA to authorise us. So, as the Lord Provost said, we hope that with authorisation and recognition we can be ready to go live by the end of the year. And in the process of that FCA approval, we will then not just be going out to brokers and market makers, not just going to CAs and lawyers, but in Q2, Q3, we will be going out to identify the companies that should be the first companies to list. We've already had some brilliant approaches. but we want to do it in a more structured way. So we'll be going out in Q2, Q3 to start identifying companies that can list. And it's not just companies. There are charities that can issue fixed income instruments. Local authorities that can issue fixed income instruments. And of course, it can be funds as well. The investment trust was invented in Scotland by Robert Fleming in Dundee in 1870. So it's not just trading enterprises, it's fixed income issuance and also investment trusts, in which obviously Scotland needs to run. I've had a number of reverses in this project, and the first one, and I think the one that we've now addressed, is it cannot happen, it will never happen. There have been at least one, possibly two attempts in the last 20 years to establish a Scottish Stock Exchange, and both failed. And one of the reasons they failed was that they proposed to build something on new technology. So you saw those Edinburgh stockbrokers with their telephones, and even before that, writing prices on blackboards with chalk. Our technology partner is Euronext, and they can't be here today because they have their annual strategy day in Paris, but they've sent me their slides. So I haven't incorporated all their slides because that will be until midday, but just some slides on our partner, Euronext, which is going to provide the operation of the trading platform. Euronext is the merger of the stock exchanges of Paris, Amsterdam and Brussels in the year 2000. Portugal joined in 2002, and in 2017 Euronext acquired the Irish Stock Exchange for €137 million in cash. They're currently bidding to acquire the Oslo Stock Exchange in Norway. I'm pleased to say I have a guest representative of the Irish Stock Exchange here, Nick, and we're already building a good relationship with the Irish Stock Exchange. So Euronext is a brilliant partner for us because they are the #1 pan-European stock exchange operator, and because they also have a managed solutions division which allows you access to their trading platform. So the Scottish Stock Exchange is going to run on exactly the same trading platform that the Bourse de Paris, or Euronext Amsterdam, or Euronext Dublin opened on at 8 o'clock this morning. It's a viable commercial partner, independently floated, market cap of 3.5 trillion euros, and it's also a 20% owner of EuroCCP, so it's a brilliant business partner to have. Euronext was originally acquired, bought into the New York Stock Exchange, and at one time was also part of the London International Financial Futures Exchange. Its history was simplified, and it became an independent company again in 2014. As you can see, 2017, acquired Dublin. We can take advantage of all of the investments that Euronext has made to run its own markets. That's that big data centre in Basildon is the exchange platform. So there will not be men writing prices on blackboards with chalk or sitting in front of telephones. That's the data centre. This is the market supervision, market abuse team in Euronext Paris. Every trade order that's entered on the book, whether it's executed or not, at the Scottish Stock Exchange, will be visible to market abuse teams in Paris and in Amsterdam. The very same people that make sure that an orderly market is run in Paris and Amsterdam and Brussels and Dublin. So it's the state of the art in terms of market abuse regulation and supervision, as well as in terms of the operation of the market. We find, as I said, Optic, the trading platform, is exactly the platform which Euronext uses for its own markets. This is a rather complicated slide, but for those of you interested in the technology side, Optic provides the Scottish Stock Exchange on day one with connections to providers of standing data and with connections to market data distribution. So on day one, the prices of securities traded on the Scottish Stock Exchange will be visible on Bloomberg terminal, they'll be visible on Reuters, they'll be visible on ICV. On day one. We don't need to do any of those negotiations except to make sure that the buy side connected to Euronext checks the boxes so that it can see the trade orders and enter trade orders on the Scottish Stock Exchange. Optic's already got nearly 1,100 international buy-side institutions and tier 1 banks connected to it. So something else I don't have to do is go around the world trying to persuade global investment banks and global institutional money managers to connect to a brand new stock exchange that only has a few issuers. They're already connected to it, because already connected to Optic. This gives us a massive step up in terms of connecting the exchange to the institutional buy side and to global tier 1 banks. And of course, I talked about surveillance, it also connects directly to EuroCCP and to Europol. This is the service that I have bought. And Euronext, of course, is operating in an extremely competitive environment, competing with the London Stock Exchange and with Deutsche Börse. in Europe, if Britain is still part of Europe, and with the New York Stock Exchange and Singapore and other exchanges outside it. So Euronext has a continuous development and improvement program from which we will benefit. Of course, we will be developing the exchange by ourselves to make sure that it works for the Scottish market and it works for global impact issuers, but we will also be able to take advantage of the development program of Euronext. And yes, there's the Basildon data centre again. I've been there. It has computers in it. The project is underway. We did the scoping study, started in 2016 and finished in May of last year. The planning finished in September, and we're now in the delivery phase. You can see underneath the execution button. So the Euronext platform will be in commission and live for the purposes of testing, but before we're authorised by the FCA, hopefully in May. And then we can move into the launch phase, managing with stakeholders, including the first issuers, the first brokers, how to use the market and to bring it live. With that, I hope I've answered some of your questions. There will be questions and answers later, but what I really hope I've done is persuade you that there is a strong business case for a new establishment and a renewal of the Scottish Stock Exchange, based in Edinburgh, serving the Scottish economy, fitting with the Scottish National Investment Bank and the Scottish Sustainability Framework, but global facing, connected to the world, and running on the best that Europe's market architecture can provide, with prices immediately available to all Tier 1 banks and all institutions the day that it goes live. And of course, with issuers that are going to work hard to demonstrate that they're running their businesses purposefully to establish a positive social impact wherever they are in the world, they'll be able to list on the Scottish Stock Exchange. With that, I'm going to hand over to the next speaker. I'm delighted he's flown from Amsterdam to be with us this morning on this rather grey day. But it rains Amsterdam as well, Jan. Jan Troen is Head of Product for Euro's central counterparty, EuroCCP.